Our first Legends Division coach is Northwestern head coach Pat Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald enters his 6th year at Northwestern. He led the Wildcats to a 3rd straight bowl game last season for the first time in school history. Northwestern returned 17 starters in 2011, including 9 on the offensive side of the ball. Have Coach make an opening statement, and then we will go to questions.
Thanks, Doug. Good afternoon. Hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and doesn't let a food coma set in here, so let's have a little bit of fun. But it's great to be back to football season. Excited about the experience that we have coming back, arguably the most experienced team that we've had since I've been the head football coach. 55 returning lettermen, 21 seniors. You know, a group that's won as many football games as any other class in Northwestern football history. So looking forward to them reporting here in a couple days. Summer school wraps up, and we'll get going next weekend. So with that, how about we open it up to some questions?
All right, put your hands up in the air, and we'll get you questions. We'll take the first one over here on the left.
Coach, you guys were a little banged up in spring ball, and excluding Dan, how is the health of this team?
Well, I'd say right now, based on the reports back from our athletic training staff, we're as healthy as we've been. When you go through spring practice and you've got 22-year-old young men on the field, you know, there's a higher risk that you're going to get some guys a little bit banged up. And we take a pretty conservative approach in the off-season to where if we think a little bit of rest might be a better decision for the long term, then we'll shut them down, and that's what we did with some of our guys, especially the older veterans for spring practice.
In the middle stage, right?
Coach, you had a unique perspective to offer Dan after breaking your leg in the Iowa game, and then you have the opportunity to go forward and try and get something back your senior year. From your own personal experience, what did you try to pass on to Dan as he's trying to recover?
Well, number one, I wanted to talk to him about being patient and understanding the roller coaster when you're dealing with a major injury like that. You know, the first aspect is dealing with the shock that you're actually hurt and you can no longer play, and what you're passionate about is taken away from you. So we dealt with that. Then you had to deal with the surgery in and of itself, you know, the initial rehab process of being immobilized. So just kind of the steps that it was going to take. I'm not going to bore you with all of them. And then you get to about this point right now where we're at. You know, he's doing great. Everything's going really well, but he's going to come back to football and not the same shape he was maybe the last time he played. And that's going to be really frustrating. And how you deal with that, how you shake the rust off, how you look at it from a bigger perspective. And yeah, you got to take it day to day, but you know what? He's going to be back. It's going to be a little bit different because his body will operate different. But you know, that's the next hurdle that we're going to go over as we get into training camp. You know, he's 100% healed from a standpoint of the injury and the surgery. Now it's about adding the strength, getting the conditioning level up, and just getting himself back to having fun. And I know he's chomping at the bit to play football again.
In the middle stage left.
Coach, you talked about how experienced this team is, and one of the most experienced group is your offensive line. I was wondering just what you're kind of expecting from that group and how that can and how they'll help with the progression of the running backs.
Well, yeah, I think you'd ask every coach in the country what's critically important for you to be successful as a football team, and it's the trenches. You got to have both sets of lines in place to have 2 fists in the fight. That's the way that I look at it. And you know, to have 137 starts, you know, coming back on our offensive line, 4 returning starters, you know, on paper, and then you talk about Diders who started games, Bartels who have started games for us, and then the young depth that we have. I'm excited about that group, but I've challenged Adam Cushing, our O-line coach. You know, it's one thing to have that kind of experience coming back. That's great. Let's continue to develop it and get it better. But 6 months from now, we'll have the youngest offensive line in the Big Ten. So it's going to be as important for him to develop that next group so we're ready, you know, for the future, and it's going to come fast and furious.
Question in the back on the aisle.
Pat, in October, you've got 3 consecutive night games. Just talk about that and how that does with your whole program when football normally has been meant to be played at 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2:30, but you've got 3 night games in a row.
It's going to be a lot of fun. There's something special, especially those 2 games at Ryan Field. When the lights come on, it's a really neat environment, and I know our fans are excited about it. We've gone around this summer and talked about our schedule, talked about the team to our fans throughout Chicagoland, and you know, they're excited that, you know, there's so much to do here to be able to do some things in the mornings with their kids and come out and watch us play at night. You know, our guys are excited about it. There's no question about that. And for us, you know, the Big Ten Network, the exposure that you all give us from a media standpoint, you know, we've benefited maybe from that the most in the country from a standpoint. Now our brand is seen worldwide and especially nationwide to recruits. So, you know, we're very thankful for that. And, you know, that kind of nighttime and primetime exposure is critically important for recruiting.
Go to Teddy over here on our right.
he's not in 100% shape like previous years, what ways will that affect him? Will that mean he will tire possibly in some games or just won't be able to run as well? What do you think?
You know, looking back, Teddy, on my personal experience, I'm not going to try to crystal ball how it'll be for Dan. I'll be able to tell you a little bit more as we go through training camp. But, you know, I got cleared just to do anything in my lower body the first week in July. And so I had to kind of go old school a little bit in training camp, like back in the day when the guys would be coming to training camp in shape, you know, to get in shape. You know, now where the guys are training 365 days a year, you know, Danny's going to have to take, you know, Camp Kenosha and get in the best shape of his life. So it'll just be a little bit of a different set of circumstances for him maybe in comparison. And as we visited yesterday, he's in a different place right now, Teddy, mentally than he was at this time last year. But he's also a little bit of a different place than he was physically. So, you know, we're going to hopefully get that combination in the right order before the opener, and he'll be ready to go.
Over here on the left.
I'll just speak loud. This non-conference slate of games you have is perhaps one of the most challenging in years. I was wondering if you could talk about what it means having 2 road trips to the East Coast early in the season to play such quality opposition.
Well, to go on the road in the opener against a team in Boston College, it's been, I believe, to 11 straight bowl games. You know, there's no question in my tenure as the head coach, this will be our most challenging opener, and we've got it on the road in the non-conference schedule. So we've got to have a tremendous sense of urgency in camp, not only to improve and get where we need to be from the things we learned last year about our personnel and also what we learned through spring practice, but then also to get to Boston College. And then a few weeks later, we go back on the road out to West Point and to play the option, to play that kind of football team, the physicality, the effort level that they play with, how well they're coached, the discipline they play with is going to be a challenge for us. It'll be a very different set of circumstances from scheme, but sandwich in between is an Eastern Illinois team and, you know, coaches last season, and they're going to be hungry and an opportunity. So it's going to be critically important, in my opinion, that we start fast.
Same side, back in the middle.
Coach, it's been, in some respects, it's been a rough couple of years for college football, and yet ratings and attendance and other markers, the game has never been more popular. You're still a very young coach, but do you have a sense of what might be done to clean up some of these issues that have sort of detracted from the appeal of the game?
Well, I think first of all, like in any business, any family, any organization, you have to be held accountable for your actions and for your attitudes. And when we make poor choices as people and individuals, no matter what it is, we have to learn from them, we have to grow. As an educator, you have to teach your young people through that experience. But when we make poor choices and decisions that impact that above that teaching and coachable opportunity, we need to be held accountable for them. And I believe in this conference, with the leadership that we have, and then obviously nationally, we're doing everything we can to take the positive steps forward as we move on. And it's disappointing that maybe that's the way some feel, but at the end of the day, I think it's not as commonplace maybe to talk about all the positives. It's just a little bit too easy to talk about all the negatives.
Down here on our right.
There was some shuffling at running back last season. How do you feel about that group at this point, and what degree of progression would you say you've seen this offseason?
Well, I liked the way that they progressed throughout spring practice. Mike Trumpy enters fall camp as our starter. The way that he finished the season was encouraging to me. Mike has got good size, good speed, understands the concepts that we're trying to do. He's going to be pushed by Adonis, and then Jacob Schmidt comes back off of injury. And as I look at the group, as a whole, I think we've got very solid competitive depth, but we've got to be more consistent there, number one, and start faster than we did a year ago. And I would love to have a bell cow. There's no question about that. You go back to when we had Tyrell, and we go back when we had a great two-headed monster and Jason Wright and Noah Herron. Going back to my days with Darnell, and I can keep going on and on with our great running back tradition. So we need to start faster with that experienced offensive line. Mike being a year older, Adonis being a year older, and competitive depth. Hopefully we'll have that accomplished. But talk is cheap. We got to go out and do it.
In the back on the TVs.
Hey, Coach, with the Ohio State controversy and some of the other things that have happened in recent years in college football, there seems to be two schools of thought emerging. One is that the scholarship's enough, but another school of thought says that maybe there should be some type of financial compensation for athletes. As not only a coach, but a former elite player, what are your thoughts on the developing controversy?
I wouldn't put myself in the elite player category, but thanks for the kind words. I think it's a hot topic right now, obviously, nationally, as I read what all of you write and what people talk about. I don't know if there's just one way to go about it, and I'm not smart enough to come up with that idea, but I think we've got tremendous leadership in the NCAA and at our president and athletic director level. And if they ask us to get involved in coaches, I'd enjoy to do that. But, you know, we need to help and provide. I don't think just our revenue sports and just the football players or the basketball players, but it's all of our athletes. The opportunity, if they cannot go out and get a job to provide for themselves, then the opportunity through Pell Grants, is a cost of attendance instead of just the grant and aid and the full scholarship that we currently have. I think all those things need to be hashed out and discussed, and then let a lot of smart people kind of come up with a plan if that's the direction that we're going to go.
Down in front on our left.
Coach, after Quentin Davey and Nate Williams graduated last year, those are two guys who contributed a lot to your program. Who are you looking to step up in the linebacking core this year?
Well, you know, 2 years ago, I think I stood up here and everybody asked me, how are you going to replace Peterman and Lane and our receiving core, Rasheed Ward and so on and so forth. And I said we had a no-name wide receiver core, and I'd like to take that now and put that to our no-name linebacker core, and I'm not going to mention any of their names. You know, at the end of the day, you got to prove it. You got to go out and do something on the field for me to garner mentioning their names in a room like this for you to write about them. And we got a lot of work to do. We got a young group. It's an exciting group. We've got some experience coming back at the top with guys like Bryce McNall and Ben Johnson who have played a lot of football for us. But it's time for that next group of guys to step up, and when they do, then I'll start talking about them a little bit more.
Over here on the right with Paul.
Hey, Coach. Jeremy's a pretty well-known commodity at wide receiver, but who do you see stepping up within that group after him?
Well, you know, obviously Jeremy Ebert, and I believe is, if not the top wide receiver, he's in that conversation in this conference. But you can't forget about Drake Dunsmore either. And Drake's, you know, obviously battled through a bunch of injuries, but he's persevered. He's improved each year, and I know how excited he is. He just was over at dinner with our leadership council the other night for kind of that last supper of the summer a little bit, so to speak, and I could see the look in his eye. So, you know, Drake would be, you know, the weapon with the most experience. I really like the spring that Charles Brown had as a senior, a young man from here in Chicagoland that to me has just continued to improve, has been primarily a great special teams player for us, but I thought he had a tremendous spring. And then Demetrius Fields had a really solid spring also. But we've got a lot of competition there. We've got a pretty deep group. We had a pretty talented group of freshmen to it, and we'll see how things progress in 2 days to see where they're at. But you've watched us play. We play a lot of wide receivers, so we'll see how those guys progress.
Toward the backstage, right?
Hey, Coach, I know you've talked about it before. You talked about it at the end of last year. You talked about that junior class. Now they're seniors. How much is on those guys, on their back, as far as leadership goes and helping this team through what's going to be a tough schedule?
Well, it's all on the – I mean, typically it's always on the seniors. But they can't do it alone. And the biggest challenge that they had to go through was the last really 2 months, and that's the summertime. You know, I'll know in August, you know, that first week in August when the kids report, you know, where they're at from a standpoint of how they've invested, the chemistry and the attitude that our football program has going into camp. That dinner that I had the other night with the Leadership Council, they feel like they've accomplished the goals that they set out for the summer. And now we'll get together and evaluate that, and then that's how we'll tweak and adjust our plan in training camp and how we're going to go. But you know, in most programs in the country, the leadership starts and ends with your seniors, and this group, you know, is what a win away from being the all-time winningest group in our program's history. So they've seen a lot of battles. They've been through a lot. They've been in the Big Ten arena competing against the best of the best, and it's going to be important. You know, typically in that senior year, you kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's a little bit more important to you than it was any other year. Not that it's not important your freshman, sophomore, and junior year, but there's something special about that senior year.
Time for one more question. One more. Right there's the winner.
Coach, as someone who's been in the Big Ten for a while, does it hurt the Big Ten as a whole? And do you get any distress from seeing Ohio State go through tough times?
Well, I think just as a college football fan, first, before I can speak about that, you want to see young men come into our programs as coaches, as fans, so on and so forth, that are going to make great choices. And when you don't make great choices at the player level, and if choices aren't great at the coaching level or at the administration level, it's disappointing. And I think, again, I'd say that about any organization, about any family. And so, you know, there's a lot that's going on right now in college football that I think we need to wrap our arms around as a complete and total buy, and we will. And we'll move forward, and we'll make it better. And there are going to need to be changes and tweaks and adjustments to bylaws and rules and how we're held accountable. Yeah, I would assume so based on what we've seen here over the last offseason. But I don't think there's a coach in the country or an administrator in the country that doesn't want to be a part of that solution. And as we work through it, As alluded to earlier, the game has never been watched, never been supported at this level. I think we're all thankful for that, but it's on us as stewards of the game to make sure we leave it in the right spot as we're moving forward while we're in it, and also as it comes after us. So hopefully we'll continue to do that in a positive vein.
All right, thanks a lot, Coach Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. Go Cats.